Random Movie Reviews. I'm Nathan, and today I'll be going over 10 underrated films. Now, one thing I need to specify is that this is not a top 10 list. This isn't the most obscure, most underrated films of all time. These are just 10 underrated films that I'm recommending to people that I think they should check out, and films that I don't think nearly get talked about enough. So the other thing about this list is that it's not ranked, it's not in any particular order. These are 10 great movies that I'm recommending to people that a lot of people just have not seen before yet. I'll also be doing the exact same list with Criterion films, so be checking on that one soon. So how do you determine what is an underrated film? Well, I don't know about you guys, but I am an IMDb nut. I love IMDb. I spend quite a bit of time on that site just looking up movies, looking up people's lists of films, and that's how I find a lot of obscure kind of underrated movies. And I decided, what if I looked up the most underrated movies of all time? What kind of list would I get from IMDb? And what could I use for my list as kind of like a measurement of how you determine whether or not something's underrated? Alright, so here's an IMDb list of 100 underrated movies. We're just going to quickly go through their top 10, see what they consider to be underrated. First choice, interesting choice. We have Taken, has about over 500,000 star ratings. Definitely not an underrated movie. I remember when this movie came out, everybody was talking about it. And it kind of relaunched Liam Neeson's career, so not that underrated. Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon, another kind of an odd choice. It has 254,000 star ratings, and it won a ton of awards. Kind of an odd choice once again. Blood Diamond has a lot of reviews here. It was an okay movie. A lot of people seem to like it. 500,000 star ratings, don't really consider that underrated. Notebook is certainly not underrated. 525,000, that's a lot of views. Little Miss Sunshine, maybe sort of underrated. It's one of my favorite dramedies ever, but a lot of people seem to like it. A lot of reviews, don't really consider that one underrated. Hero, that could be a little bit more underrated. That's definitely more underrated than Crouching Tiger, for sure. Letters to Iwo Jima, or From Iwo Jima. Yeah, this one could be considered underrated. World War II film, about 150,000 and 170 for Hero. So maybe around the 100,000 mark is a good place to draw for what's underrated. Catch Me If You Can is not underrated. Look at that, almost 1 million, or almost 900,000 reviews. It's certainly not underrated. Pursuit of Happiness, another one, not really underrated. Everyone talked about it for a while there. Almost Famous, yeah, a little bit more underrated. Definitely has a strong cult following for sure, 250,000. So I kind of used this as a reference and determined, okay, how about I do about 100,000 star ratings and below? Typically I would want below. So all of my movies, all the 10 movies I looked up on IMDb, and they are all well under 100,000 reviews and star ratings on IMDb, so I kind of use that as a marker to determine a movie is underrated enough, I guess. Okay, so in no particular order, let's start with the first film, and that is The Driver. The Driver is a 1978 Walter Hill movie. Walter Hill directed a cult classic favorite of mine, which is The Warriors. And I literally just saw this movie today. It's 5:19 p.m. now. I watched this movie at around 11 o'clock this morning, so I literally just watched it, thought it was a lot of fun. The film starts off with a phenomenal chase sequence, and it also ends with a really stellar chase sequence. My only flaw with the movie is that a little bit in the middle, it drags just a little bit, but you know, this movie is about 90 minutes. It's really not that long. It was engaging, it was fun, it has a tremendous sense of style. It's definitely underrated, considering the amount of influence this movie has had. It's influenced movies like The Transporter, Drive, Baby Driver. Tarantino has said it's influenced many of his films. So, you know, a movie that a lot of people haven't talked about that I think a lot of people would enjoy. I really enjoyed it and would definitely recommend it. And speaking of Walter Hill, the next film I'll be talking about is The Getaway, which is a film Walter Hill did not direct, but he wrote. It was directed by Sam Peckinpah, who directed The Wild Bunch, one of the greatest Western movies ever made. And this is a Steve McQueen movie, and it is super, super badass. Kind of in the similar tone of The Driver. Pretty simple setup. You know, Steve McQueen is an ex-convict who is kind of forced to do one more heist for this corrupted official, and obviously things do not go according to plan. This movie has a lot of great action sequences. It's really fun, really fast-paced. And, you know, if you watch The Driver and you haven't seen The Getaway, it's like they're so similar to each other in terms of tone. I would definitely recommend both of them. Next film we have is a Martin Scorsese movie called After Hours. I remember when me and my friend were living together and we wanted to watch kind of a hidden gem film, and I'm like, you know, I heard of this movie After Hours, and we're all big Martin Scorsese fans. Let's watch After Hours and see what we thought, and we really, really loved this movie. The plot is basically we have this guy who's going to go out and meet a girl, and it seems like it's going to be a relatively straightforward night, kind of like a simple date setup, and everything goes wrong, and it turns into one of the craziest nights of his entire life. Really fun film, possibly Scorsese's most underrated film. Very accessible, it's a very interesting movie. It's not boring at all. One I don't hear a lot of people talk about, so here I am recommending it.
So I haven't got enough money to get home until I meet this bartender who wanted to lend me the money.
That's all right, forget it. That's all right.
Good boy.
So I go back to the girl's apartment, but her roommate's really pissed off at me for the way I treated her friend.
This the guy?
Hi. So I march right in there to apologize. Come on! But she'd already killed herself. I was too late.
Oh, wow.
Lighten up.
Next one is a film I've talked about a bunch recently to a lot of friends of mine, Midnight Run. This film's really interesting in terms of its legacy. It was critically acclaimed when it came out. It did very well at the box office, and then for some reason kind of fell into obscurity, one of those films that people just stopped talking about. I randomly watched it on HBO Max, which I believe it is still streaming on, and if you have HBO Max, definitely watch Midnight Run. It is a super awesome buddy action comedy film, and one of the best I've ever seen in that genre. It's like right up there with Lethal Weapon. It's that good. And Robert De Niro is hilarious. We all know he could do comedy because of movies like Analyze This and Meet the Parents, but I think this is his best comedic role. It's very, very funny. Him and Charles Grodin have tremendous chemistry together. All around, a movie that I think more people should watch because it's so entertaining. It's such an easy watch. It's on HBO Max, so if you got that, check it out. But yeah, really, really awesome movie. In fact, I recently just bought this on special edition Blu-ray. That's how much I love this movie.
Now who the fuck is this? Jesus Christ! Do something! You guys are the dumbest bounty hunters I've ever seen! You couldn't even deliver a bottle of milk!
Next film is one I mentioned in my True Romance review, and that is The Last Boy Scout. Last Boy Scout is a Tony Scott film, and it is written by Shane Black. Now, Shane Black has done a lot of great stuff. He created and wrote the first two Lethal Weapon movies. He's directed other hidden gems like Kiss Kiss Bang Bang, more recently The Nice Guys. So he clearly has a love for the buddy action genre, which he kind of created. And Last Boy Scout is no exception. It is really funny, really great action sequences, kind of tongue-in-cheek, purposely over the top. Shane Black is a great writer, so there's a lot of great witty dialogue moments in this. And Tony Scott, I've always said, is a very underrated director, especially in terms of action. For people who have seen True Romance and haven't seen Last Boy Scout, I think you would really enjoy Last Boy Scout, especially if you loved the look and the feel of True Romance. Bruce Willis and Damon Wayans are awesome, and they work really great together, good chemistry. Yeah, it's definitely in the vein of like a Midnight Run or Lethal Weapon, so more people should check it out. Not enough people talked about it in my opinion, so another great recommendation from me.
Put your seatbelts on!
Yo, Joe, this is bad.
Hang on!
This is very, very bad!
You alright? Let's go, come on.
Yeah.
Next one is another action comedy. I really like action comedies when they're done right. And this next film does it really, really well, and that is Grosse Pointe Blank. So I'm a big John Cusack fan. He's made some of my favorite movies, like High Fidelity is one of my all-time favorites. Say Anything is another really great movie. The Sure Thing, which is kind of another underrated film directed by Rob Reiner, is very fun. And Grosse Pointe Blank is a great concept for a movie. It's about a hitman who is going to his 10-year high school reunion and is kind of rekindling an old flame, an old relationship with his high school girlfriend. And obviously things go bad, and it is very funny, it's very endearing. I believe John Cusack actually helped co-write the script. The soundtrack to this movie is really awesome. So yeah, if you guys are John Cusack fans, like I am, then definitely check this one out. You probably have if you're already a fan of John Cusack, but if you're just a fan of good action comedies in general, I highly recommend this one.
With you.
Alright, the next film I'm going to talk about is a super obscure, I would argue probably, well actually these next two are probably the most obscure films on my list. On IMDb, I believe both of them have less than 8,000 star ratings, which is very obscure. But the first one we'll talk about is Straight Time, starring Dustin Hoffman. Straight Time has a pretty simple premise. It's basically about this ex-con who is, trying to live a normal life, trying to escape his criminal past, and trying to start a relationship, just basically starting over. He can't be the normal everyday Joe. The life doesn't work for him. So he kind of comes back into in criminal activities and stuff like that. And it's super well done. Dustin Hoffman obviously gives a super awesome performance. This is pretty early on in his career. And it's just a super great, gritty crime action movie with a awesome high octane heist in the movie. It's a movie that I haven't heard anyone talk about, and I kind of just randomly came across it on IMDb, decided to give it a watch, and was very surprised at how much I enjoyed this movie. It's not the easiest film to find, but, there are ways. And overall, if anyone's a fan of 70s crime thrillers like I am, definitely gotta check out Straight Time.
Yes, I like the pink casket, but I need a 24-inch ring. Well, we can order that from you. That's no problem. What about, what do you mean? What are you doing?
Step back, please.
I do what you're told, you won't get hurt. Get against the wall.
And like I mentioned with Straight Time, my next film is also fairly obscure, and that is The Yakuza. So The Yakuza stars Robert Mitchum, who's a classic old school Hollywood movie star. And I think this was his last role, or one of his last roles. And the movie was written by Paul Schrader, who wrote Taxi Driver, one of the greatest movies ever made. And the movie, well, I don't want to give too much with the plot in this movie, but basically Robert Mitchum was stationed in Japan during World War II, kind of had a relationship, and now he goes back there because his old colleagues are in trouble. And the ending to this movie is amazing. It kind of has a slow build, and then there's some surprising action elements in the movie, and then the ending is just really, really well done. Really great, gritty, surprisingly violent film. I really enjoyed this one. Next one is just a pure comedy, pure mockumentary, and that is Best in Show. So I've always said this is Spinal Tap has to be in my top 10 favorite comedies of all time. I kind of grew up watching that movie. I'm a musician, so I love a lot of the guitar-related humor in that movie. And Best in Show is from the same creative team as Spinal Tap, with Christopher Guest being the main director and main writer for this film. But like Spinal Tap, pretty much everything in this movie is improvised. So Best in Show is a mockumentary about dog shows. It's about the specific people who are competing in these shows. And very simple premise, very original premise for a comedy film, and there's just some amazingly hilarious moments in this. Odds are, if you're a fan of Christopher Guest and you've seen This is Spinal Tap or Waiting for Guffman, then probably have already seen this, but for people who may not be familiar with this film, it is hysterical. I mean, Christopher Guest essentially created the mockumentary, and without it, we wouldn't have shows like The Office and Parks and Rec, or Modern Family is another example. It kind of revolutionized comedy. So if you're a fan of any of those things I just mentioned, definitely watch Best in Show. It kind of created the medium.
What did she do when she saw you? She just stood there staring at us. She didn't say anything. Didn't say a word. What would you like to say to Beatrice right now?
I'm sorry. I'm sorry you had to see that.
Beatrice, can you look at us? Come on, honey. Mommy and Daddy are over here.
And the last one is a John Carpenter film, Assault on Precinct 13. You could argue that most of John Carpenter's films are underrated, with the exception of maybe Halloween and The Thing. He is a cult director, not by choice. He always mentioned he'd rather be a big, more successful filmmaker, but he's one of my personal favorite filmmakers. And Assault on Precinct 13 is, in my opinion, definitely his most underrated. Assault on Precinct 13 has a fantastic setup for a grindhouse crime action thriller. And that premise is this precinct is under attack by a gang. And in the precinct, there's hardly anything in there because they're in the middle of the move and they were doing a prison transport. So some of the prisoners are in this precinct along with one police officer, and they basically have to join forces in order to escape this precinct alive. Like I said, that is a fantastic premise for such a low-budget action movie. You could tell that John Carpenter was a director with a very signature style and a very specific type of mood and atmosphere, and I think this is one of his best movies. My favorite film of his is The Thing, and then following it Halloween, but Assault on Precinct 13 would probably be my top 5 of his movies. It is super fun, super underrated. Don't get it confused with the remake with Lawrence Fishburne and Ethan Hawke. I haven't seen the remake, so I can't really talk that much about it. All I know is that if you're gonna watch Assault on Precinct 13, I am recommending the 1974 version by John Carpenter. It is fantastic.
The windows! Watch the front.
Well, anyway, guys, that's my list of 10 underrated movies. Like I said, they're not the most underrated movies or the most obscure movies of all time, just movies that I feel people should watch and I think people would enjoy. Be on the lookout for my next list, which is just going to be 10 underrated Criterion films, where I'm going to use a different type of criteria that I'll mention in the video. But as always, thank you for watching.